Okay, so today we have Khadijah Brown joining us from Marshall University. Khadijah, thank you for being here and talking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So to get us started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you became interested in behavioral health and your current field of study?
Like you said, my name's Khadijah Brown. I am from Southern West Virginia, and I got interested in mental health because I have a family connection to it. My grandfather was a veteran, and he actually had PTSD to the point that he could watch movies about certain things. And the next morning, say if he watched a movie about pirates or anything, he would wake up in a psychosis until a couple hours later, after we start talking about other things. And then, like a lot of people, my great grandmother had dementia, so I've always been kind of interested on how to slow down or even try to reverse the process.
Okay, and so the current field of study that you're in at Marshall for your master's is what program?
It is the mental health counseling program.
Okay, great. So I don't know if you have experienced this or know people who have, but sometimes, unfortunately, there's a stigma that surrounds the field of behavioral health, whether that be the profession itself or the population served or anything like that. So what is your response to that or experience with that?
I always try and not completely change the stigma on the first time that I meet somebody. I kind of have an open discussion with them. So if they're like, for example, an African American community, that means you're crazy. I can just go to church. Okay, well that's fine, but what happens when you don't feel like this is working out for you, or it works for a couple days, and then a few days later you're back into the same spiral? So I try to kind of help people understand the field more. I found that to be a common factor is a lot of people don't truly understand what we do in this field. They kind of think, hey, they just write the medicines because you're crazy and they send you on your way.
Sure. So what are some examples of what you'll be doing in the field once you graduate? What types of services do you provide and that type of thing?
I actually am thinking of taking the focus on children or veterans. That's have been my top two fields. But as far as therapy wise, I do plan to do like cognitive behavior therapy. When I work with younger children, I of course want to administer play therapy because you get a lot of different responses from children when you have them interacting. And then I've recently discovered the eye movement desensitization, and that is for trauma to where you distract someone as they're reliving their trauma to hopefully take away the emotional response. So that's something I'd like to incorporate as well.
Wow, yeah, I've never heard of that, so that's very interesting. Um, and so you kind of talked about this a little bit already, but the challenges and barriers to reducing that stigma, it sounds like, offering knowledge and education and that type of thing is how you plan to address that. But what are some other ideas of barriers and things that you may have to tackle as a professional?
Working with someone who is resistant, because you can provide the information and they can take that initial step and be like, okay, well, I finally go. But with them saying, okay, I'll finally go, it's kind of hard when they do decide to show up and they're like, this isn't going to help me. Like, I know this isn't going to work. This won't work. So it kind of has to do with how willing your client is, also. That's another barrier. And then when you do have family therapies and things of that nature, sometimes you'll find with children that parents don't want to engage because they don't believe in therapy. So there's all types of different barriers, just depending.
I think we may have lost connection. Can you hear me okay? Okay. And so could you talk a little bit about how your view of mental and behavioral health has changed since, during your journey into the field?
When I first started, I was excited. I'm like, okay, I'm going to change somebody the first time I meet them. I'm going to see them twice and it's all going to be over and done with. And that's not how it kind of works. So that kind of got discouraging. But at the same time, as the process continued, I actually started to see the change. And then I thought, okay, I'll never get burnt out. Like, I understand actually taught me to take a bigger interest in work home separation and self care. Because in this field, it's really important that you have self care depending on what populations you work.
Absolutely. Sorry, we're losing you a little bit again.
Oh, goodness.
Okay. Um, and so you were breaking up a little bit, but you were talking about self-care in the profession. So can you just repeat what you were saying there?
I mean, self care is very important because some of the things you see, you'll have easy weeks where it's like, okay, the information wasn't that harsh. And then sometimes you'll have weeks it feels like the trauma's hitting you back to back to back. Because as you're working with these people, you want to help them just as much as they want to help themselves. And after you're exposed to such deep and wild stories, especially with children, it's important that you kind of go home, relax, release, find things to do in your spare time that'll make the transition easier so that you leave work at work and leave home at home.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that goes, along with the high rate of burnout that we all hear about and that type of thing. So that's definitely important. And I'm glad you brought that up. Um, and so to kind of wrap things up, as it relates to your profession, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Lord, this is always a hard question. Um, I actually work in an emergency room now, and so I kind of want to connect the both of my loves for medicine and for behavioral health. I really would like to go on and get my Psych D and kind of look into research with Alzheimer's and dementia because a lot of people don't know that Alzheimer's, you can work with the brain, do exercises with the brain because the cells are deteriorating so you can save them, while with dementia, it's complete cell death. So to try and bridge that gap to where you can catch it early enough before it completely goes on to dementia is something I've been really interested in researching.
Wow, that's great to hear. And I think that's a great gap that you'll fill, between medicine and behavioral health. So that's really interesting. Well, West Virginia will be very lucky to have you out here serving its communities. And we appreciate you talking with us today. And thank you so much.
All right, thank you.